Hello, my name is Jorb. I'm really squatting to stay in frame. I love gear, and this is the Kodamo MASK1. It is a 10-voice digital synthesizer that uses Bitmask technology or Bitmasking theory to generate the shape of its oscillators. And that was enough of a difference that I said, yes, this is new and exciting. I'd like to check it out. But once I got it, I realized it branches off from a normal or sort of expectant subtractive architecture in enough other ways that it's just interesting from that perspective. It's a virtual analog that has a lot of different ideas, different characters. And the more time I spent with it, the more time I realized how important a lot of the performance features are and the considerations of the play modes that give you all sorts of flexibility and options in terms of setting this up to be used during a live set or as part of a performance or whatever. But I think it's much more interesting to talk about this at all once you understand the bitmasking angle, the bitmasking oscillators. So I'll talk about that really, really early on in the demo, and I won't say anything else now. You know how I go. I opine the entire time I'm demonstrating. So this is a loaner with an option to buy it at a discount, and Kodamo said if I don't decide to keep it, they're willing to compensate me for my time anyway. So this does count as a sponsored video. Thank you, Kodamo. I'll point to wherever corner YouTube tells you that. I will have an affiliate link in the description where you can check the price, and if you buy anything I can get a kickback. If you're subscribed, really appreciate you coming back. If you're a Patreon, it means the world to me. I got to do some more for you guys. Yeah, everything else I want to say sort of relies on an understanding of the bitmasked oscillators, so let's do that right onto the table. Here we are on the table with the MASK1. I think this is the patch everybody will start on when they turn it on. Okay, this is sort of a hard one to structure, okay, because there's a lot of things to talk about. So if things feel a little disjointed, just trust that I'm trying my best to make it make sense. But first impressions, love the way it looks. Feels really nice. I think it's a Fatar keybed. If it's not, I'll cut that out. It's got this thin red felt strip that is a classy splash of color. But the interface, a lot of people are going to say, oh, the interface, where are all the knobs? This is reminiscent of the AX73, for me, the Poly 61, the EX800, things where you redirect your one parameter and update one parameter at a time. I don't hate that. It certainly is in some ways outdated, but I recognize it as, in this case, a creative choice. And it sort of implies some of that era, for me, late 80s synthesis of analog trying to sound digital and digital being very early. And that is, in some ways, I think, what a lot of the sounds in this are informed by. Regardless, if I just pick a random preset, very digital. Here's another one. Very analog. Okay, so there's not one category of sounds sort of you would expect to hear, and I know either of those could have been digital or analog, and this is all digital, but I sort of mean, what's the right way to say it? There's sounds in here that feel more reminiscent of a straight-up subtractive analog, and there's sounds in here that also feel reminiscent of FM or wavetable synthesis. And that, in no small part, is the result of the way the oscillators work. And the namesake of this, MASK1, is its Bitmask oscillators. It's Bitmask synthesis oscillators. Okay, so there's your exposition to talk about the most unique part of this. So we're on an initialized patch now. That is the default mask or shape that we're going to hear. If I go to oscillator 1, and actually just quickly, the way you navigate, you pick one of these buttons here. It'll stay lit for ones that have multiple parameters in them. You scroll through them here. See, I can't go any further left or right when I hit the ends. I can also hit this multiple times to scroll through. And then you change the value here on this values encoder. So let's start with oscillator 1, mask. There we are on 7, which we can see in this little collection of shapes is sawtooth-ish. Sounds pretty sawtooth-ish. If you're looking really close, you can hear a little bit of artifacting. Certainly not a bad thing. And I'm going to scroll through these without explaining to you what they're doing yet. Got a this all the way to 31, which is just a sine wave. So the way these oscillators work, there's 2 of them. Each one is a sine wave at its core. And the bit masking part of it is it's subdivided into different sections, and each of those sections is modified somehow. That subdivision might be brought to 0, it might be inverted, it might be repeating an earlier section. There are all sorts of ways they can modify these subdivisions, and that's what's making these wave shapes. But it sounds pretty good, and that, right, this one is a specific example, really, it's one I randomly landed on. Sounds like it could be a synced oscillator, or the result of FM, or the portion halfway through a wavetable. And that's why we have so much timbral diversity in the results of these sounds, because they're starting with something which ends up being so flexible. And it's flexible because they're getting to these shapes in a new and unique, interesting way. And I think that is the most exciting part of this instrument. Of course, these things are not static. So if I go through our parameters here, we have semitone, tune, it's like a detune, and then we have start and speed. So if I set the start to, let's say, -10, and the speed to something slower, watch the scope. We're scrolling through, we're sort of shifting through those wave shapes with our delta envelope. So that's these little diagrams here, delta on the mask. And then I'm going to bring the filter down just so it's a little less harsh. And of course, we can modulate those with other things. So this is our LFO1, mount, speed, destination. We can send to oscillator 1 volume, oscillator 1 mask, or the mask of both. Sounds busy, sounds messy, right? But if I keep that a little more subtle, lower amount, speed can stay high. Especially if we have the cutoff low. Now those changes aren't so abrupt. I need tracking. And we have this movement that's from a totally unique source. Because it's really not like its closest analog, I think, is shifting through a non-morphing wavetable, because it's an abrupt change between one shape to another. And you can sort of soften it with effects and all sorts of other things, but that's where a lot of what makes this interesting starts. And then I find it a little difficult to know what to talk about next, because just going through the parameters isn't that fun or interesting, but there's a lot of things I really want to make sure I call out, because there's a cool level of detail and a lot of things you can do. So I'm going to zoom back out, and I'm going to give you sort of, I'm talking about a synthesizer, bullet points. It has 10 voices. It's all digital. The filter is 2-pole. It's emulating a 2-pole subtractive filter. We have an individual envelope for the level of oscillator 1 to noise in the filter. So there's 4 envelopes. We have 2 LFOs. The ADSRs can loop. There are effects. We have 2 effects that have a bunch of different types. There's an arpeggiator. If I turn it up, I feel like I'm just starting Oracle of Seasons. We have an arpeggiator, which I need to turn off that way. We have a delta envelope for our pitch, which is just like I showed you for the masks, which is a start point, a speed. This also has an end point. Think of that as your release, which is another thing that reminds me of the Game Boy. Our modulation destinations, or modulation sources, excuse me, that is a V for velocity, M for the mod wheel, A, T for aftertouch. And each of those has a single destination and a single amount. Okay? We can layer 2 patches. We can split 2 patches at a point in the keyboard. Okay, there's your back of the box talk, because I want to make sure I don't miss any of that stuff. If you ignore like the coolness you can get from the bit masking or the uniqueness, so to speak, of it, this is just kind of a good virtual analog synth. I'm going to use this to do a few more examples, but this is what I would describe as a sort of expectant subtractive sound, right? Oscillator 1, it is using MASK1, just our sawtooth. And I don't know if I mentioned it, but the way you control the envelopes, this is like a shift key, and this lets us get to our envelopes. You can control all 4 of them at once if you'd like, or any combination of them. But each of those has a level. For the oscillators, that L is a mix, and the noise as well. For the filter, it's sort of the amount that it's going to increase our filter cutoff by. This shift function also lets us get to our sequencer, which will play in the background, and I can play over it. Which is a cool feature, and not something that every synthesizer will let you do. Great. If I put this just even on a random mask, let's turn down the level of oscillator 2. Oscillator 1 up. But just by changing the mask, I can totally change the sort of genre of the timbre, let's say. 6, 7, 8, 9. Sort of expected analog. And as you change, they get wackier and wackier and wackier. Cool, cool, cool. Okay. Awesome. And I really like the sound as it was. So if I change it back. Cut off a little higher. I'm going to change the release from both of these to be a bit lower. Because I want to show you some of the other play modes. So I go to General. This is right now paraphonic. So the envelope of the first note you play or the envelopes will be the envelopes that persist. They'll stay at that sustain level as you hold it for any other note you play. But there are also, of course, normal, polyphonic, monophonic, and one of the interesting ones, slur. So you can hear it's polyphonic still. But if I play notes that are close together, they'll bend. If I change our portamento to be a little higher, and I turn down the balance of our reverb, see, if I play notes that are spaced out, polyphonic. If I play ones that are close together, then it monophonic, and it'll bend between those. Sort of a performance feature that I wouldn't expect from a synthesizer like this. And that's part of what makes this so interesting. It seems in some ways like a singular vision of here's a throwback interface for this sort of late analog, early digital inspired thing. But it also has like a lot of cool performance features and a lot of considerations to, the way interacting with the keyboard will change the behavior of the synth that make it stand out. And that's not the sort of thing I would have expected from this. And I really, really like that. Really, really like that. There are all sorts of other play modes. I'm not going to show you all of them. There are paraphonic. This is Molly, where they are, it is monophonic. in the way it responds, but if I go back to our release envelopes and get it higher, it's monophonic, but the releases can hang over each other. That's such a simple, like, what if we had a play mode like that that makes this like really flexible? I haven't seen anybody else do that. But to me, really is a credit to the design. There's also mono and poly retrigger modes, paraphonic that also includes that close note slurring. All sorts of really, really cool options for that. I'm having a little trouble structuring this, and I did when I sat down. I wasn't sure what it was going to look like, because it is just like, look at this neat thing, look at this neat thing, look at this neat thing, and they all happen to be in the same instrument. You know what I mean? So I think I've shown you all the like highlightable stuff. And there's just good sounds to be had all throughout it. I feel like I've gone fast, but also gone slow. I don't feel like I need to go into excruciating detail with the way to control these things. I do think it's pretty self-explanatory. You can see that I'm moving relatively quick. It's not that hard for me to manipulate through here. I'm just going to click through our patches until I see one with a split or a layer to talk about that. Here's a layer. Our options for the layer. This is our balance. So all the way one side. This is a single patch. So that would be P99. And if I go to balance, bring it all the way to the right, that's just P0, but in the middle, they are equal. You can individually pan them. I hope you have headphones on. You can hear one on each side. Individual patches can also be panned individually. So if I undo that layer, which is double tapping voice, go to general, pan spread, and turn that way up, you'll hear each time I hit a note, it's panned hard right or hard left. Not if I don't retrigger it though. Let's turn that down, but still have it in there. Just to give you some stereo imaging, I'm going to go off and back on, so we have our layer back. And you can detune them in cents or in semitones. Great. Splits work similarly. So if I turn the split on, same thing, but we have a split point. So down here that would be P99. Up here is P0. There's our cutoff, bottom 2 octaves, and the upper 3. Same options essentially as the layer as well. We have our semitone, balance, panning, and our fine tune. If I hit init, you can initialize. There are a few different options. 1 oscillator, 2 oscillator. I think that's velocity, but there's a random one. That sounds really good. What mask is that? 68. And there's some movement in the mask as well. But again, how about initialize random? This is a sound I'd like to add some effects to. So let's add chorus. And if I go to balance, to type, some delay. And that was just a random sound 3 steps ago. Random. Something totally different. Again, that's just like, oh, you can randomly generate patches and they turn out good. And I think they turn out good because you have such a tight range on some of these parameters. It's only like 1 through 15. Like, the steps are never going to be that out of control. This one's kind of a dud, I will say. See somebody using that. This one sounds great. I need less release, though. What effects do we have on? You know, I guess I didn't tell you what effects we have. So we have, on the FX Type 1, can be a chorus, a distortion, a bit crusher, or a ring mod. I like all these options. I would have much preferred one option to choose your type and then some parameters, even if it's just 2 parameters each. For oscillator 2, or excuse me, FX2, we have delays, reverbs, and distortions. So if I do delay 9, oh, I turned the balance up too high. I'm actually going to save this patch because I quite like it. I'm going to save it over U2. Right. That's fine. It could be that name. And sort of the same complaint here for the FX2. Our delay, you can hear it shifting and changing. I would love if that was just like a feedback and a time control plus the balance, of course. And reverb, instead of just like trying to, what is reverb 16 going to be? Oh, really short, and reverb 3 is quite big. Instead of just having that, I would have liked maybe, you know, I would have liked a regen and a size, or a tone and a regen or something. Even just 2 parameters for each of those would have been really nice. That's not to say they don't sound quite good, because they sound quite good. It's just the style of control. I don't think you're sacrificing any of the other sort of, I don't know the right way to say it. I don't feel like you're sacrificing the sort of design philosophy, so to speak, of having these buttons in the one encoder by giving us variable option of the effects. Is our filter on a low pass? There are low pass, band pass, and high pass. And notch. General mode, I want slur. Noise level. Cool. And I know that, like, that's just the delay and the reverb, or just the reverb sounded good. But that's not a bad thing. That doesn't mean this doesn't sound good. I think it sounds really good. Yeah, I don't know. I find it easy to get lost in a lot of these sounds because they're good and the performance elements are good. And maybe I'll just segue right into the conclusion here. So, because picking a random sound, adding effects, changing just a few parameters, I really like where I ended up with that. And that makes me just appreciate if you have a cool, good sounding sound engine where the parameters are in a range that's, you know, with not enough parameters to really get lost, you're going to find good sounds pretty often. And I think that's the big draw of using the MASK1. If you're comfortable sitting down and working out patches in advance and then incorporating it into a performance, live or pre-recorded or whatever, I think that's a use case that works really well for this. Or if you want to explore a new type of oscillator, or if you want to explore a new type of oscillator, or if you want something that's sort of has the capability to be digital, but you're more comfortable working with a subtractive workflow, I think there's a ton of reasons that this becomes really, really, really interesting. This is a loaner, like I said. I haven't decided yet if I'm going to keep it. I'm going to give myself some time after the video to think and ask. To think if I don't keep it, I'll send it back to the manufacturer, or I'll send it on to another demoer. Anyway, yeah, I don't feel like I have that much else to say. Maybe I'll sprinkle in a few other sound demos earlier. This is a really interesting instrument, and it's part of what's exciting about, sort of the modern synth and instrument market, is stuff can be totally unique, stuff can be really, really different, and still just as valuable. And I'm really, really happy to show it to you. So there you go. My name's Jorb. I love gear. That certainly includes this, the Kodama MASK1. Thanks for watching. Cheers and so long.